everyone, Katarina here. Welcome to another video with fun masculine cards. Well, at least I think they are fun. This is just my take on masculine cards. Today I'm creating a card with a galaxy background. This is definitely the easiest galaxy background that you can do. So here are the supplies. I will be stamping and watercoloring, so I'm going to be using watercolors, brushes, watercolor cardstock. And the stamp set I'm using is the legendary stamp set by Avery Elle. This was one of those stamp sets that when I bought it, I thought, this is fun, this is going to create a cool card. But when it was time to make the card, I had no idea what to do. If you would like to see the full list of supplies, just hop over to my blog. But remember, you do not need to use the exact brands I'm using. This is just what I had in my stash. I really can't remember how the idea to create the galaxy background came about, but I really like the end result. It fits this particular stamp set very well. But you can use whatever stamp set you have, or you can just add a sentiment that would work as well. I taped my watercolor cardstock to a board using a painter's tape, and then I started painting. The reason why this is one of the easiest galaxy backgrounds that you can make is because I'm using only one color. In this case, I'm using purple, but you can use black, blue, or green. I'm doing here the wet on dry technique. I started at the top with a very dark shade of the color. And as I moved down, I was adding less and less color to create a gradient. Next, I came back and added more color. This time I didn't want a smooth application as I did on the first layer. I'm not sure what the term is, but I was just dabbing the brush, creating something like blobs of color to create a cloud-like texture. I wanted to keep the middle part of the paper very light. I think this is a very cool effect. I really like when there are spots that are lighter or even white. So I tried to avoid that area, but it was still darker than I wanted. So I cleaned and dried my brush using a paper towel, and then I soaked up the color, and I had to repeat this a few times until I was happy with the look. I let the piece to dry, and then I added a third layer of the color, starting very dark on the outside, making the paint lighter towards the middle. And when I was happy with the look, I let the piece to dry. Once the paint was fully dry, I added the stars. I'm using here gouache, but you can use acrylic paint as well. It's important to use an opaque paint. Watercolor white is just not opaque enough. I mixed the white paint with a little bit of water, and then I took an acrylic block and put some of the paint onto the acrylic block, and I flicked the paint off the edge to create the splatter for the stars. I also tried a paintbrush to do the splatter. I dabbed it in the paint, and then I tapped it with another brush to get the paint off. It wasn't really working, so I used an acrylic block again for the rest of the stars. At the end, I also went in with a small brush and added a few stars here and there. You can also use a toothbrush for the splatter. When it comes to splatter and the tools I use, for me it's often a hit and miss. I try all three and see which one works. One day I have success with a toothbrush, for example, and the next day it's just a hot mess and it doesn't work. What do you guys use for splatter? What works for you? Let me know in the comments. I removed the painter's tape and I put the piece on a side to dry. And while it was drying, I worked on the images that I will put onto the card. As I said, if you don't have any good stamp set for this, you can just add a sentiment, like a big bold sentiment, either heat embossed or die cut. That would look great as well. But I have this legendary stamp set by Avery Elle. I really like it. So I stamped all the images that are in the stamp set: an octopus, a pirate ship, and a birthday cake. For the stamping, I used the VersaFine ink in Onyx Black, which is a waterproof ink. And I also used a watercolor cardstock because I will be watercoloring. To paint the octopus, I'm using the same watercolors as for the galaxy background. I just didn't want to use too many products, but you can also use watercolor pencils or water-based markers, as they might be easier to control. When I think of an octopus, I imagine it in pink, but I googled and octopus can change colors to gray, brown, pink, blue, or green. And I painted the octopus in sort of a gradient. I do this when I paint with water-based markers. Then I painted the water. There I tried to add texture. I also painted the cake and the ship, and when it was dry, I cut all the images using my scissors. As you can see, I kept the bottom part of the sea. I painted it rather cutting it out because I wanted the water to be there. But if I adhered it like it is, it really looked weird, like unfinished. So I decided to add a frame, just like I did with the tulips card a few weeks ago. As I mentioned before, I do not have a die cutting machine at the moment, but I pre-die cut few shapes before I moved to Sweden, and one of the shapes was this frame. I pre-die cut all the shapes using a white cardstock, since you can always color it, and that's what I did. I used a black paint and I added 2 coats of the color. If I had a die cutting machine, I would just use a black cardstock. And actually, after I finished the card, I got some blotches on the frame. I have no idea what it was. I just placed it somewhere and it got damaged. So I took a black alcohol marker and covered it up. So if you don't want to use a black paint, you can use alcohol markers as well. Next, I created a banner with a sentiment. The banner I painted in pink as the octopus. I let it dry and then I stamped the sentiment. The stamp set with the octopus has great sentiments. You can create sentiments like "Have a legendary birthday," "Unleash the Kraken." But I'm making a card for my dad, who is not an English speaker, and I don't think he would understand it. So I only used the stamp that says birthday, and I added the word wishes from another stamp set to create the sentiment birthday wishes. Thinking about it, there is another stamp in the stamp set that says "It's your." I could have used that, but I completely missed it. Before I started adhering all the pieces together, there were a few parts on the octopus that I could not cut out, so I painted them with the purple paint that I used on the galaxy background. Now let's put the card together. I started by adhering the octopus and the banner with the sentiment on the back of the frame using a tape runner. And then I adhered a double-sided foam tape on the backs of all the images and the banner. On the back of the galaxy, I adhered a simple double-sided tape. You can also use a foam tape, but I did not want to make it too bulky. And I adhered the frame with the octopus on top of the panel with the galaxy background. Then I tacked in the 2 little images with the ship and the cake, and I adhered them behind the tentacles of the octopus. And lastly, I adhered the whole piece on top of a card base. First, I thought I will use a card base made out of a craft cardstock, but then I decided to use a plain white card base. Also, the panel with the galaxy I trimmed a bit, as it was slightly too big for the frame. So the card is finished, very simple galaxy background, and I think it really complements the stamp set with the octopus. I hope you liked it as well and will try something similar, especially painting the galaxy. It could not be more easier. If you like this card, I would really appreciate if you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I would really appreciate it. If you would like to have another inspiration for masculine cards, make sure you check out my previous video. The video should be showing on your screens now. If not, I will link it in the description below. It's a card with a stamped guinea pig and another fun background. So that's all for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you soon.